Welcome to AuthorMix. I'm Katie Allender, author of Bad Girls Don't Die. Joining me are Margaret Stoll and Kemi Garcia, authors of Beautiful Creatures, Melissa De La Cruz, author of the Blue Blood series, and Cecil Castellucci, author of Rose Sees Red.
Just keep writing. And I know that seems like a bad one. Well, it's not really clever, but I think there's a point. I heard another writer I taught a workshop with, a LA writer, she calls it BIC, butt in chair. Mm-hmm. There is a whole sweat factor to the whole thing that I think people sometimes think being a writer is like a mystical state that descends upon you. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like being a shaman, and you like switch into writing mode, and the spring of the creation comes from you. And there is the whole part that's called sit your butt down in the chair and sweat it out. And okay, when I was in elementary school, every day we sat down and we had to do a free write for like 10 minutes, where if you could not think of something, you wrote, nothing comes into my mind. Nothing comes into my mind. Right. Nothing comes into my mind. Your pen had to be moving for 10 minutes. I don't know why. I don't even know if that's a good idea. But what it did for me was say writing is a mechanical act in some sense. You do sit down and write. And I'm not the kind of person that can sit down and do it at 9 every day. You know, those writers amaze me. But there is something to be said for you have to write a book or you don't have a book and you're not a writer.
I would kind of say, to negate the whole writing tips, is there are no rules. I think that it's really intimidating to think that you have to go out and have, like, you know, an MFA in order to be a writer. You have to have read a certain book. You have to have an outline. I mean, I have one that doesn't, you know, Katie doesn't have one. You have to have an outline. You have to have a fancy
skinny
desk
skeleton
chair, whatever. The one thing that I always say, a lot of kids write us and say, like, you know, how to, you know, I don't know about this or that, or I don't know if I'm doing this right. And I'm like, there's no right. You find your voice, you write the story you want to write, and if no one else likes it, no one else likes it. And I think part of that is the freedom of not wanting to be a writer and then ending up being a writer, because I didn't know what the right way to do it was. I just did it my way. And I think a lot of people could tell their story and could write if they stopped being hung up on how do you do it, and then you just do it however it comes natural to you. Because I don't like all the lists of, like, tips are awesome, but, like, forget the rules about writing. Right. I just don't think there are any rules.
I think my tip is, like, finish, you know, like, start something, finish it. You know, it's really hard to, you know, give yourself a deadline. For me, I don't think I'd ever finish anything if I didn't have the deadline. And I think it's just, you know, it's kind of, some satisfaction from just finishing your book, your story, you know? I mean, see how it ends. Take it all the way.
Well, it will definitely not get published if you don't actually finish it. So, you know, that might be a good tip to actually finish it.
But how do you force yourself to do that if you're...
Fear. I think fear is a huge motivation.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I think James Patterson said, you know, he grew up kind of poor, and, you know, for him, it's like everything is still, you know, a hustle. It's still, you know, he doesn't take anything for granted, you know.
Well, for me, it's like I always wanted to be a writer, and in order to do that, you have to finish it and send it out. So I've got plenty of people that I know who are maybe more talented than I am, you know, but they don't send their stuff out, and they don't finish their stuff. And so it's like I decided a long time ago that no one is going to give me the career that I want unless I actually get my butt in the chair and finish it and send it out. So, you know, so I think that's great.
And I think when I say fear, I am never scared of rejection. You know, like I'm okay with, you know, bad feedback, bad reviews, critical, you know, and people totally slap me. I am not scared of sending my stuff out, and I think a lot of people are scared of that. That's why they don't send it out. They don't want to hear that they're not good, you know, and I think every writer, you know, just has some kind of confidence. Well, how do you know you're good? I was like, well, I don't know. I just kind of believe I'm good, and I send it out, and you know,
I always say, this is the teacher in me. You know, I always say no one knows if you're good, because the reality is reading and books are subjective. You know, I always tell the kids, you know, books are like ice cream. Like, you couldn't pay me to eat mint chip, and probably half of the country lives on it. So there's a different book for every person. So who's to say if you're good?
That's right.
You know?
My dad said it's all opinion. Yep.
I'm going to say don't be precious about your work.
That's a good one.
I think that, like, a lot of times what happens is that the general we, get, like, attached to our idea and our thing and whatever. We don't want to hear anybody's opinion about, like, you know, what's good about it or what's bad about it, and then we don't have good ears to be able to listen to critique to make the story better. My opinion is that if you only have one story inside of you, well, then maybe you should be precious, because that's the only story that you're ever going to tell. But I bet that every single person who wants to be a writer has like about 1 million stories that they want to tell. And so if you don't get it in one story, guess what? You can recycle that cow and put it in the next story.
Right.
So I would say don't be precious about your work. You'll always get that idea out there in another piece.
This is more of a technique that I use, but it's for times when I'm stuck on a character. I mean, I'll go through weeks where I'm like, this thing is driving me crazy. It's a process that's kind of like churning butter in my head. It's like you really have to, it's the opposite of sit in the chair and write it. You have to sit somewhere and stare at a blank wall and think about your characters and just let everything sort of settle. And I've come up with more random connections that became solutions that way than, you know, ever sitting down and trying to make a list of what can I do about this? Because, I mean, and I guess sometimes that's just taking the time to let a story build. There are so many writers who can write a book in 3 months, and I think that's great. I had to come to peace, I had to come to peace with the fact that I'm not that fast as a writer, that I need more time than that to figure out my answer. So I guess boiled down, it's like, find how much time it takes you and use that time. Don't try to write on somebody else's timeline, because
Well, I think the thing is that it's like when you think you're not working, you're actually working.
Yeah.
right.
Because thinking about it and staring at the wall is working.
Right.
Yep.
That's what I tell my husband. Okay, guys. It's time to say goodbye, and I'm going to let you all help me.
So long.
Cecil, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that all of our books are out there wherever you like to buy books, or go to the library and read and discover new worlds.
Oh, I was just going to say bye.
Sorry. Follow us on Twitter. Check our websites.
Because there are going to be awesome giveaways and swag associated and future episodes, right,
Future
Katie?
episodes. Go to authormix.com to learn more about us and our books. Cecil's YA novel, Rose Sees Red, and picture book, Grandma's Gloves, are available now. Kemi and Margie's Beautiful Darkness, the sequel to Beautiful Creatures, hits stores October 12th. Melissa's Misguided Angel, the 5th Blue Bloods book, is due out October 26th. And From Bad to Cursed, the sequel to Bad Girls Don't Die, hits stores next spring.